I think one of the most difficult issues that needs to be addressed, and it's a really tough one, is wealth inequality. I came here 20 odd years ago, and there was still a huge difference between rich and poor. But in the 20 or so years that I've been visiting your country, it seems to have grown wider and wider and wider. And we talk about radicalization, Kaizen. That will radicalize people, especially when you've got access to Instagram. Let's say you're dirt poor 20 odd years ago. You didn't really know how the other half lived. Now all you do is go on Instagram and it gets rubbed in your face.
Yeah, you could watch Cribs on MTV, I remember that.
Yeah. I kind of liked Cribs even when I was broke.
It was fun. I don't know if that show's still around. Yeah. I agree. And man, this is one of those issues where I actually think there have been some Democrats who have correctly identified the problem, which is, corporate influence. Like Bernie Sanders, he talks constantly about the oligarchy. And, he does it to the point where almost it feels like a bit of a meme. But I think he's right. Like, I'm pro-capitalism. I think capitalism is the best system that has ever been invented, or at least the least bad of all the other economic systems, empirically speaking. But there's a point at which capitalism can be co-opted by corporate interests who are influencing the laws and basically engaging in regulatory capture where they basically rig the rules in their favor. And I think that's also what's probably been going on in New York too, hence the rise of Zoran. So wealth inequality is an actual issue. And I don't think the issue is inherent to capitalism. I think the issue is corporate influence and centralization of power among the few as opposed to distributed among the many. And that's what I think hopefully the right and the left can both get on board with. But that seems to not be happening yet.
Well, yeah, exactly, because the left are far better placed to actually exploit that, because that's one of the things with being on the left. You're concerned about that. What worries me is that the right just seem more interested in demonizing the politicians that talk about it than actually addressing the problems. It's not everyone on the right, but it seems to be a lot of them. And I'm thinking to myself, if you don't actually deal with the problems, we are going to get a lot more left-wing populists because, problems aren't being addressed. People's concerns aren't being addressed.
Absolutely. And that's why it's not important to people whether it's a socialist or a capitalist. They want populists first. So if I was running the RNC or whatever, I would say, hey, we need to find a populist capitalist as a foil to the populist socialist and communist. And we need to meet them there and extol the virtues of capitalism when it's well structured. Because if you continue to just demonize the populace of any color, what happens is people just feel, oh, well, you don't actually care about my problems, so at least this guy's talking about my problems. Most people are not thinking deeply about the economic ramifications. They don't really know how to assess these things, nor should they really have to. But if there's only one person who's actually speaking about the problems, they're going to go along with what they say, no matter what their solution is.
Yeah, well, the thing with that, though, is it really fundamentally depends, no matter how important you think wealth inequality is, fundamentally depends on where you think it comes from. And I think the corporate capture argument is obviously partially true. I also think, to a large extent, it's probably something that's been driven by technology. I mean, most of the wealth that's being created in this state, I would venture, is in one city called San Francisco, where people are doing AI, right? And you don't need a lot of people to do that. What you need is a lot of money and a lot of energy and a lot of chips. So I wonder whether we're just going to live in this long age of populism because the wealth is accumulating in fewer and fewer hands just by the nature of the technological structures of the society we now live in.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point because now that I think about it more, I think there's kind of two issues. There's what's this condition of the people who are the worst off in society? And then there's what's the gap between the people who are the worst off and the people who are the best off, which is the wealth inequality question. I don't think it would get us all the way there to just address the situation of the people who are worse off if you still had wealth inequality, but I think it would get us a lot of the way there. And if you look at California, you literally see homelessness everywhere. Many people who are not homeless are like one paycheck away from being homeless. And that's just an awful existence. Like it's like bare subsistence. And I think if you're that kind of person and you look at the situation of like a billionaire or some San Francisco AI guy, you look at your situation as like, man, I can't even be happy with what I have because what I have sucks. where at least if their situation didn't suck, it would probably be easier to accept the fact that we're gonna have trillionaires in relative short order. So, yeah, it's hard. Like, I think there's going to be more extreme pulls, I think, in the future, just because that's what technology does. It allows exponential transformations of the physical world. And yeah, you're just gonna have some people who are way, 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 way richer. But I think if we can at least take care of the position of the bottom of society, it'll feel better for people. And I think there's actually a deeper conversation to have about the relationship between the rich and the poor, in this country for sure, but maybe in the West in general, where, I've been thinking about the term aristocrat. And the etymology of aristocrat is the most excellent or the best among us. And there used to be this relationship between the rich and the poor where if you were one of the wealthy ones, it would almost be like, instead of being at the top of the pyramid, you're at the bottom of the pyramid supporting everyone in service. And at some point, the social contract kind of broke down. And I think people who became wealthy became more selfish, honestly. And I think people who were poor became resentful of the rich. And if you're rich and you see people who are poor or resentful, you're not going to want to take care of them. And if people who are poor don't see rich people, doing things for everyone else, they're going to become resentful. And it's just this vicious cycle. So I remember a few years ago, Mark Zuckerberg, he tried to donate this hospital. And, I don't know why he did it. I assume it's of the goodness of his heart. And maybe it's for social status, but it's a good thing to do. And people rejected that. Like, they didn't even want his donation. And that shows me there's something really broken about the relationship between the best off and the worst off. And I think, look, I'm not one of these people. I think we kind of have this fallacy of like everyone's equally capable. Not everyone's equally capable, right? Not everyone's going to be a billionaire. Not everyone's going to make a world-changing technology. So there's kind of a natural aristocracy. And if we can get honest about that, then we can have a conversation about, okay, well, what should the aristocrats be doing? And what do we give them in reward for doing what is good for the collective? And we should be celebrating people who are doing things that benefit all of humanity. Like Mark Zuckerberg should have been celebrated when he generated enough funds to create a hospital wing. But yeah, there's just like there's this right-left divide, there's this poor-rich divide. And there've always been rich and poor, but I don't think it's always been this level of animosity.
This is a really interesting point. I think it was during certain periods of ancient Greece, the rich and powerful were expected to almost dedicate their entire lives to actually doing things for their community and for society. And yeah, you're right. Like, you could be a billionaire now who pledges to give away 99% of his wealth, and people will still hate you.
Yeah. Because you're a billionaire.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Your point about inequality, by the way, I haven't seen the latest research, but I remember reading the Spirit Level, and the argument they basically made is, actually, once you get past a certain basic point, which this country is way past, it doesn't actually matter how well off the people at the bottom are. What matters is the gap between the rich and the poor. And that ruins everything for everybody, including the super rich, weirdly enough, because all of the metrics of social disease, population in prison, teenage pregnancy, interpersonal violence, those things go up as inequality goes up. So it's actually going to be, you're going to get this wave of populism from both sides. And I suspect both of them are going to struggle to actually fix the problem.
Well, if that isn't depressing.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do here at TRIGGERnometry.
Yeah. Depressnometry. Yeah. I think it's just a difficult problem to solve. And, there's kind of this hedonic treadmill effect, I think, that maybe is going on too, to be fair, because, if you were to talk to the average person who's working a 9 to 5 where they're making $15 an hour and say, well, you're actually at the point past which there's diminishing returns and you actually have enough, I don't think they would feel that way. I think they would feel, no, if you doubled my salary, it would make my life tangibly better. So.
And they'd be right.
I think they'd be right? I think it would be nice if you didn't have to worry about if you get fired, you're going to be homeless the next month. Like I think many people are below that threshold.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know the research. I've heard these stories like past $80,000, like, you know, more money doesn't make you more happy and
Oh,
stuff
no,
like
that's
that.
all bullshit, man.
Okay, cool. I'm like, it sounds like BS to me.
That's total bullshit.
Okay.
The idea that money doesn't make you happy is a story that rich people tell poor people so they don't feel jealous. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually heard a good quote from Tony Robbins, actually. I went to one of his events recently, and he said, if you think that money doesn't make you happy, you haven't given enough away. And I was like, oh, that's actually really interesting framing, which kind of goes back to the whole natural aristocracy idea. You get to a point where you have so much wealth that the fun part is giving it to good causes. So I think, again, we need to address this at the bottom and also the gap, but I think we can at least start with what's going on at the bottom. And a lot of people are just in conditions where it's like, yeah, resentment's natural.